This is the first entry in a series of reviews I've written discussing my thoughts on the Game Awards nominees for Game of the Year in 2020. There isn't a predetermined order for the reviews in this series, but they were produced with the intention to be watched as a whole. I've personally completed all of the nominees on my own time, and for full context, I recommend you play through them as well before watching this review. There's something to be said about the inherent campiness of unabashedly systems driven games. In 2020, when a game decides to throw in floating disembodied heads with the promise of a one up, it's a conscious choice. There must have been a point where developers considered an alternative, a less abstract depiction of this concept. There must have been a point where developers chose to be extra, and there isn't a game that I can think of that better exemplifies this choice than Doom Eternal. With the latest entry in id Software's legendary series, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on how far these games have come. Calling Doom extra is not a hot take. Since its conception, these games have effectively propelled themselves on metal OSTs, hordes of chaotic demons, and ridiculous amounts of firearms. It is easy to forget that until recently, Doom wasn't just known for its heavy metal demon slaying, but also one of the biggest blockbuster blunders of gaming in the 2000s. While Doom 3 might have muddied its legacy for a time, its recent Bethesda led reboot, Doom 2016, did well to bring the series up to form in the eyes of many of its fans. Personally, I've never been too invested in the series in general, but I think it's an important precedent when considering some of the decisions made on its latest entry. With Eternal, the series has passed the corrective measures of its predecessor and blasted off into bold new directions. Interestingly, while playing the game, the greatly expanded moveset of the Doomslayer felt very much at home as a character action game. Think Devil May Cry, Vanquish, and Bayonetta. Like others in the genre, at first, the player's arsenal gives you a dizzying variety of options when approaching battle, and it only increases as the game goes on. There was definitely a click moment late into my playthrough where I was finally able to get into the rhythm of split-second weapon swapping while dashing and swinging all over combat arenas, avoiding and adapting to every sick new demon the game would throw at me. The newest, most exciting demon being the merciless Marauder, of course, a humanoid slayer-like enemy with an arsenal of its own, who's only vulnerable during a strict reaction window. This enemy alone vastly improved the pacing of many encounters in the game, and almost single-handedly instilled the valuable instinct of how I would go on filling my resources in the middle of a fight. The steep learning curve that comes with this type of gameplay was undoubtedly soothed with a healthy amount of tutorializing, though to veterans I can imagine pop-ups like this might be a little intrusive or even patronizing. For me, however, nothing felt out of place. The tutorials, the power-ups, and scattered ammo and health drops felt so cohesively video gamey that I was glad it had decided to embrace this identity. This may seem like a shallow observation, but it's something that just wouldn't leave my head for the duration of my time with this game. Considering its contemporaries, Eternal feels more like it belongs in an arcade than on the Game of the Year's nominees list. It's not that I've become tired with how narratively integrated systems have become, as seen in the downright simulationist mechanics of awards darlings Red Dead Redemption 2 and The Last of Us Part 2, which clearly strive for a more cinematic comparison, but when a modern game strives for this particular level of abstraction, I can't help but feel like some weight has been shed, that the game is firing on all cylinders. That's not to say this game doesn't have its own wealth of cinematics, though. Doom 2016 had a lot of story and text to read for a game like this, and I can't say that I was a fan. Like everything else, they seem to double down on this verbose style of storytelling, which I have to say was to its detriment. It all seems a bit too drawn out for what they're going for. The admittedly simple origin story of the Doomslayer getting a power up once he's trained by a holy order of space knights after the events of the original Doom trilogy takes about half the game to explain, and that's after a botched cold open sequence that handwaves a new giant space fortress he's come into possession of off in between games. In the end, despite the uncompelling narrative, I found it pretty inoffensive, which is a shame considering how much time is dedicated to it and how many cutscenes, however poorly directed. Judging by how many YouTube videos there were to explain all the lore and story in the last two games, there's certainly some market out there for this that I'm just likely not part of. Doom Eternal makes no compromises in its identity. In a far cry from its divisive middle years, all the cards are laid out from the word go, and you know what you're going to have, this rip-roaring good time. Eternal expands the concept of Doom in exciting and interesting new ways, all while maintaining a classic arcade-like feel. I look forward to spending much more time in the game to truly master the Slayer's impressive new moves, or maybe just to face off against more of the Marauders.